Come see us on tour. We're going to be in Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. I try not to have heroes because your heroes will always let you down, right? And then that hurts. But I did it with Bernie Sanders. And but so Glenn Greenwald's always been, you and Glenn have always been in that realm for me. And I was watching Glenn. He did this segment in response to something that you had written, and I wanted to show it to you because here are my two people I admire greatly having different opinions on this, and I want to get your opinion on what he had to say. So it's about 4 minutes, and we'll listen to it.
Okay. Quote, "Hi, Glenn. It's fascinating to watch the success of Doge, what's being exposed with USAID, etc., and two of Trump's most controversial picks, Tulsi and RFK, being confirmed. It does seem like we're headed for some sort of renaissance or course correction long overdue. I'm curious about your take on Chris Hedges' recent remarks about the empire self-destructing, which is the alternate way of viewing these events. Here is his first paragraph. Quote, the billionaires, Christian fascists, grifters, psychopaths, imbeciles, narcissists, and deviants who have seized control of Congress, the White House, and the courts are cannibalizing the machinery of the state. These are self-inflicted wounds characteristic of all late empires, which will cripple and destroy the tentacles of power. And then, like a house of cards, the empire will collapse." I do, without all of that invective that he put there, and I'm not sure why that's there, just leaving that question to the side for the moment, I do think that a lot of what's happening is through necessity. The reality is that this American empire is unsustainable. I'm not somebody who thinks the minute the United States government has a deficit or even debt, that's kind of apocalyptic. It is not the same, and I've never accepted the analogy that just like a family has to balance their budget, so too do governments. Governments can use debt financing and have for lots of different reasons, but that doesn't mean there aren't limits on them. And if you look at the debt of the United States and what is required to be serviced, just the interest payments alone, and then you lay on top of that the trillions and trillions of dollars that we've spent on foreign wars all over the place, it is obvious that needs to be reined in. Even if you're morally supportive of it, even if you think it's strategically advantageous, it's simply not sustainable. The United States cannot continue to sustain the level of debt that it has and the policies that generate that. So I think a lot of what Trump is reacting to and a lot of what Elon Musk is doing is almost an inevitable recognition that there has to be a radical course correction. But at the same time, I think it's an important course correction. I do not think that American empire has been good for the world. And often the argument is, well, even if it wasn't good for the world, the alternatives would be worse. We don't have to live under a single superpower or a single empire. In fact, most of world history has not been a unipolar world. There is a benefit from balancing powers. And yes, that was tried in the 18th and 19th century, and it often produced wars, this idea that we were going to have a balance of powers and no one would be dominant. But it just simply is the fact that if you look at how many wars the United States has started, how many of the wars the United States has fueled, how many of the wars the United States has fought, how many of the proxy wars the United States fuels, so much of the world's violence emanates from the United States. And there have been empires in the past that would use wars to use it as conquest, take land, take assets, and for a while that can be fed. But ultimately, even those empires collapse because it just becomes so sprawling and so unmanageable. And so I think that part of what is happening is this late stage empire that Trump is reacting to, and the recognition that most people in Washington have, but have been unwilling or afraid to express, that this cannot be sustained for much longer, that this needs to all be reined in. But I also think in the case of Trump, there is a real ideological conviction that most of what the United States does in the world when it comes to interfering in foreign countries, trying to control foreign countries, trying to start wars, is very bad for the United States, very bad for American citizens. I believe there's an ideological conviction there. And if you're on the left and you believe that impulse comes from a more paleo-conservative or right-wing or isolationist impulse, maybe you can find it disturbing, even if you think a left-wing version of that would be good. I guess if you're really intent on not just demanding radical change, but demanding it in exactly the way that you want it, based on the exact premises that you want it. I don't really have that demand. I want to see the National Endowment for Democracy defunded and shut down. I want to see the CIA and the NSA and the FBI severely limited in the role that they play in the world. I want to see U.S. foreign policy far more oriented toward getting along with other countries rather than dominating them and manipulating them and exploiting them. I want to see the military-industrial complex radically reduced so that it doesn't have an incentive as its only profit and power mechanism to constantly start and fuel wars. And whether this comes from this kind of an ideological perspective or that is far less important to me than the fact that it happened. And so when I see it happening, I'm going to be encouraged by it. I'm going to applaud it. I don't have a need to call the people doing it deviants or psychopaths or whatever. In fact, the first thing that we saw from Donald Trump was the imposition of a ceasefire that ended, at least for some time, the single worst expression of state violence I've seen in my lifetime, which is the absolutely nauseating, complete destruction of the society of Gaza and the lives of 2.2 million people by Israel, funded by the United States. That came to an end because of Donald Trump. You want to call people psychopaths and deviants and monsters, call the people who funded those things, which are Democrats and the Biden administration. And certainly they didn't have opposition from the Republicans, but they were still the ones who did it and who stood up every day and defended it and financed it. And to me, the way that you judge a person is by the outcomes they produce. And so far, the primary outcome that Donald Trump has produced has been that ceasefire in Gaza, along with a serious attempt to end the war in Ukraine, what has put the United States on a path to clearly resolving that war sooner rather than later. And then at the same time, expressing a worldview that I think is very healthy and long overdue about the way in which the United States has tried to bully the world. Elon Musk said that the United States has been bullying the world, has been interfering in other countries, and we should start minding our own business. So whatever you think of the people who are doing it, and whatever you think of their motives, or whatever you think of the impulses that are driving it, seeing these things being done and hearing these things being said are things that I regard as extremely positive. And all along, from the very beginning, when I was far less negative about Trump and the emergence of Trump and the Trump movement than most people were who had been associated with the left, the reason for that is that I could hear and see this realignment. And so could neocons. Neocons left the Trump movement, were petrified. It did everything to sabotage it because they understood what I understood as well, which is that their project was endangered by a Trump-led Republican Party. And it was for exactly that reason, the reason that neocons hated him, that I found potential value in Trump and in the Trump movement and in the realignment that he could usher in, knowing that the Democratic Party would never deliver any of those things, that reforming the Democratic Party or trying to work within it or whatever was a fool's game. That was something I believed for a while and then saw the futility of it for so many reasons. And then with the emergence of Trump, it got even worse because they became defenders of establishment dogma and institutions of authority. And so all the things that made the Democratic Party irrevocably rotted intensified a great deal. And I think you're seeing the wisdom of that view being vindicated in just the first weeks of the Trump administration.
So go ahead. I mean, I share a lot of what he said. Like the fact that the neocons were against Trump made me pique my interest, and they're against Tulsi, they're against Cash, they're against RFK, and so what would you like to say?
Well, I mean, first of all, I know Glenn and have deep respect for him and have for a long time. I think he didn't. I think he just read the first paragraph of my article. That he kind of misrepresented what that article was about. And what it was about was, in late empire, those who assume power essentially cannibalize the empire for their own benefit and essentially destroy the mechanism of empire. But everything about empire that he said, I agree with and have said and written for many, many years. I worked on the outer reaches of empire and many of its wars, and understand its viciousness and its cruelty and its racism. Empire, the outer reaches of empire, empire itself is the external expression of white supremacy. It's always racist. Iraq, I mean, I was in Iraq. I mean, the way that U.S. soldiers referred to Iraqis, sand and the N-word and Haji. I mean, it was so, I don't disagree, but I think he missed the point. And I talked specifically about AID. AID, like many NGOs, became weaponized by the empire. And so the National Endowment of Democracy became a way, one of the interesting things is that these tools were used to bring down Jeremy Corbyn. If you look closely, they fund any group that is against a government that expresses any kind of autonomy. They use aid as a weapon. So for instance, in Haiti, they helped rebuild the airport in Port-au-Prince, but the quid pro quo was Haiti would vote to keep Cuba out of the Organization of American States. I mean, it's always weaponized. I saw it overseas. Groups like AID essentially do in a public way what the CIA used to do in a covert way. And by destroying AID, they don't actually understand one of the fundamental tools that empire uses. So you use aid as a way to reward people and support people who are compliant and surrender to the dictates of empire, and punish people who oppose it. That's why Evo Morales threw AID out of Bolivia. So the point was that these people like Musk, they don't actually understand how empire works. I hate empire. To the core. I covered the wars in Salvador and Guatemala and Nicaragua. I've seen it up close. And I think Glenn just misrepresented. I'm going to hold with the fact that they're deviants and all that kind of stuff. I think the moral rot is pretty high, as it is in the Democratic Party. Hunter Biden, and I think everybody is essentially, morally bankrupt on both sides. That was the point that I was trying to make, that they don't know how to manage, because are they going to close the 800 military bases? Trump loves power. I doubt it. And the Republicans right now are trying to push through a bill where will increase military spending by $100 billion over the next 10 years. So the point is they don't know how to manage empire. It's not that, and I would disagree on this one point with Glenn in terms of intent. I mean, Glenn's position, your position, my position is, let's bring the empire down. It's no good for anyone else. It's no good for us. I don't think that's their position. I don't think so. There are all these reports now, B-52s being flown over towards the Middle East. I don't know what they're there for. I don't know what we're going to do, which is Netanyahu's wet dream of bombing Iran. I mean, and look at his fantasy about Gaza. I mean, I will give Trump this. Biden administration, Blinken, they all knew what the end game was for the genocide in Gaza. It was not a secret, but they just lied about it. I mean, Trump was completely. I mean, that's like, you got to hand it to him that way. He's more honest in that sense, kind of in spite of himself. And then there was just this little thing he sent out. I don't know if you saw, Jimmy, where he was like, it's a cartoon of like the Riviera, and yes. It begins by showing pictures of like Gaza all bombed out, and next thing you know, it looks like Dubai, and there's a golden statue of Trump. And okay, I mean, so yeah, I think Glenn probably didn't do a close read of what I was saying, but I everything he said about empire, of course, I agree with, and I've been saying for a really long time. I just don't think the intent. I don't think the intent of the Trump administration aligns with what he wants, what I want, and what you want. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm proved wrong, but I don't think so.
Do you think there is an ideological commitment or an ideology that Trump has of non-interventionist? I think he's a puppet of Israel. But he's made. Well, he's ending the Ukraine war, which is going to really hurt me because I have a big bit about the Ukraine war in my special, which I just taped last weekend. Uh-oh. So that's horrible. But I wish he could keep that war going at least until July. But but I'll take it. I'll take it on the chin I'll take one for the team. But he is ending that war, and he has talked. At least he's given lip service to being friends with Russia and China. And did you hear when he said he wanted to get together so we could all reduce our military spending by 50%?
Yeah, I mean, no, we spend more money than the next 10 nations combined,
right?
Including Russia and China. So it's disproportionately
right.
Look, you and I have long opposed the proxy war in Ukraine. And been very vocal about it. And I think that ending the war is a positive. It's an unwinnable war. It was designed primarily to degrade the Russian military at the expense of Ukraine and Ukrainians and isolate Putin. That's what it was always about, any war of attrition. I mean, the odious Henry Kissinger even said at the beginning of the war, it should be stopped and there should be land for peace. And we won't get into the history of Ukraine and the real, very real campaign against ethnic Russians. That's all real. Not to mention the promise of not expanding NATO beyond the borders of a unified Germany. I was actually there. I heard Hans-Dietrich Genscher, the then German foreign minister, and James Baker say it. So, yeah. But of course, what he wants is to align himself with Putin, because I think that authoritarian model is one that he admires and wants to emulate. I mean, Trump is just transactional. He wants the rare earth minerals. Now Putin's offered him more rare earth minerals. We've got Jeff Bezos paid $40 million for a puff piece on Melania Trump, of which she gets, I think, $26 million. And now that's not enough, so she's getting corporate sponsors. I mean, it's just completely transactional. He's just a grifter. I don't think he has an ideology particularly. But Project 2025. I mean, they can't put an executive order in front of him fast enough and hand him his Sharpie to sign it. I think he probably has only a vague notion of what he's doing. There are very nefarious ideological elements behind this. And look, I'm trying to get my way through the Project 2025. It's a tough read. I don't know if you've tried to read it. but it's important because and in there they talk about expanding, essentially destroying any kind of diplomatic at the State Department and any kind of diplomacy, and it's just all about the hammer and expanding the military budget and military presence globally. That's all 2025.
I mean, if that was Donald Trump's real agenda, why would Dick Cheney oppose him? Why would the neocons oppose him? Why would most of the establishment Republican Party be never Trumpers? Why, if that was really his agenda, why would they would exalt him?
Well, I think on that aspect, people like Dick Cheney, in terms of expanding the military footprint, they don't oppose it, but they oppose it on everything else. Essentially that, we didn't get into the deep state. The deep state is real. The deep state is a hostile force towards Trump, without question. We saw the heads of all of the intelligence communities, once they left office, essentially seek to discredit and destroy Trump in terms of this whole fictitious Russian asset stuff and Russian.
So why would they? So why are they doing? So that I still don't understand. I think it's because he ran as a non-interventionist. He ran on getting us out. That's why they opposed him in 2016, because he said we'll get out of the Middle East. And now he wants to end the Ukraine war and have peace with Russia. I think that's why the neocon. So that seems to be. I
think what the election, when you define the election that took place, it was between corporatists and oligarchs, and they're different. So corporatists want stability because they make long-term investments. They want stable trade deals so they can get all their tax money out of here and import goods without paying tariffs. They want the decorum of an Obama or, Biden. I don't know how much decorum he had, but I mean, so oligarchs are different. Oligarchs want chaos. Oligarchs want to rip down the superstructure. And it's because it's pure rentier economics. They want to create toll booths. That's what the cloud capital, it's what Yanis Varoufakis calls techno-fascism. So that's how, Jeff Bezos, he doesn't really make anything, but if you want to get anything, you got to pay him to get it. And so that oligarchic control is different from capitalist corporate control. The corporatists backed Harris, the Democratic Party. The oligarchs backed Trump, and they want different things. So as we began the show, we talked about private equity firms like KKR. They want to harvest. I mean, Musk wants to all of these. So they've just fired, 5,000 civilian employees and work for the Pentagon, right? I think there's 1 million civilian employees they want to get rid of all of them and just outsource. Everything gets outsourced, they make money off of.
So that's an oligarch agenda? Yeah,
they want to destroy the Department of Education. So everything gets privatized. Everything is going to be privatized.
So that's not that's not. So getting rid of the Federal Department of Education, that's not about putting the money back into the states and having them do it.
No, it's about funding charter schools, quote unquote Christian schools.
But that's what Obama was for too. I mean,
no, I'm not saying, Jimmy. Don't get me. I don't like Obama.
No, I'm just saying. But that's a corporatist. I always thought I saw that as a corporatist agenda.
Well, it was all online education. Yeah, but they didn't go to the extreme of wanting to close the Department of Education. I mean, what we're talking about is a kind of, yes, the irony is that the corporatists created the oligarchs. They created these figures by essentially through unregulated capitalism. But there is that tension within capitalism, as there always has been, between corporatists and oligarchs. And now the oligarchs run the show. I mean, you can see they're all Thiel and Musk, and they're having a field day, and they're going to make money that we can't even dream of. I mean, so but what they're doing is weakening. They're harvesting the government. Who wrote about this was Karl Marx. He said in the late stage of capitalism, when they can't extract wealth from an immiserated population, they actually extract wealth from the very structures that made them wealthy and destroy it. That's Karl Marx. That's what's happening.
So who is the oligarchs would be people like Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, Musk, Larry Fink from Blackwater, right, and Peter Thiel. Those would be the oligarchs. And who would be the corporatists?
Well, they'd be the people who run GM. They'd be people who make things.
Okay.
The people who actually make things in sweatshops in Monterrey, Mexico. I mean, GM, which moved its plants from Anderson, Indiana to Monterey. So all the union jobs are gone. They pay workers in Monterey $3 an hour. They get to drive the trucks back into the United States and sell them to us at the same price, and they make a lot more money. So those are people who deal in physical products, physical goods. Think of oligarchs primarily as people who set up toll booths between you and services you need. That's what the for-profit healthcare industry is. They set up toll booths and they extract massive amounts of profit. They own your utility. They own anything that you need. Which should be a public, part of the public infrastructure. They take over, and of course, what they really love to take over is things we can't live without, which is like healthcare. Nobody chooses to get, cancer or something.
So Jeff Bezos basically created a platform. He didn't create the products that are sold on his platform. He just created that thing, and now he's like a toll booth for you. Every time you buy something, you have to pay a toll. But Musk actually makes things. He made the electric car, which Tesla made him most of his money, and now he makes satellites, and he's a contractor.
Yeah, but where does he get a huge proportion of his money from?
The federal government. Yeah,
he's the biggest parasite there is.
Yeah,
I mean, what does he own? 60% of the satellites? I think that's right.
Yes. Yeah,
60%, and how many of those work for are essentially is the U.S. government paying him to use?
Right. That's right.
And then AI. Don't forget AI. So, those Tesla cars are just iPads on wheels. Everything that you say, every music that everywhere you go, all that information is captured and sold. So Musk is in this kind of what Giannis calls techno-fascism, is in deep.
Okay. Do you have any more time? I have one more thing I'd like to talk to you about.
Yeah, sure.
So I was very happy. I was one of those people. I was happy about Kash Patel taking over the FBI, even though he's a horrible Zionist. That seems to be the price of admission into any administration. You have to become a horrible Zionist. Come see us on tour. We're going to be in Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.